Okay, you've talked to Elon quite a bit. You've written about him quite a bit. Just it'd be cool to hear you talk about what are your ideas of what the magic sauces you've written about with Elon. What makes him so successful? His style of thinking, his ambition, his dreams, his the people he connects with, the kind of problems he tackles. Is there kind of comments you can make about what makes him special?
I think that obviously there's a lot of things that he's very good at. He's obviously super intelligent. His heart is very much in like, I think, the right place. Like, and, I really, really believe that. Like, and I think people can sense that. He just doesn't seem like a grifter of any kind. He's truly trying to do these big things for the right reasons. And he's obviously crazy ambitious and hardworking, right? Not everyone is. Some people are as talented and have cool visions, but they just don't want to spend their life that way. Mm-hmm. So, but that's none of those alone is what makes Elon Elon. I mean, if it were, there'd be more of him, because there's a lot of people that are very smart and smart enough to accumulate a lot of money and influence, and they have great ambition and they have, their heart's in the right place. To me, it is the very unusual quality he has is that he's sane in a way that almost every human is crazy. What I mean by that is we are programmed to trust conventional wisdom over our own reasoning, for good reason. If you go back 50,000 years, and conventional wisdom says, don't eat that berry, or this is the way you tie a spearhead to a spear. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, I'm smarter than that. Like, you're not. That comes from the accumulation of life experience, accumulation of observation and experience over many generations, and that's a little mini version of the collective superintelligence. It's like, it's equivalent of like making a pencil today. Like, people back then, like the conventional wisdom, like had this knowledge that no human could ever accumulate. So we're very wired to trust it. Plus, the secondary thing is that the people who, just say that they believe the mountain is they worship the mountain as their god, right? And and the mountain determines their fate. That's not true, right? And the conventional wisdom's wrong there, but believing it was helpful to survival, because you were part of the crowd and you stayed in the tribe. And if you started to, insult the mountain god and say that's just a mountain, it's not, you didn't fare very well, right? So for a lot of reasons, it was a great survival trait to just trust what other people said, and believe it. And truly, obviously, the more you really believed it, the better. Today, conventional wisdom in a rapidly changing world, and a huge giant society, our brains are not built to understand that. They have a few settings, and none of them is 300 million person society. So your brain is basically is treating a lot of things like a small tribe, even though they're not. And they're treating conventional wisdom as very wise in a way that it's not. If you think about it this way, it's like picture a bucket that's not moving very much, moving like a millimeter a year, and so it has time to collect a lot of water in it. That's like conventional wisdom. In the old days, when very few things changed, like your 10, great grandmother probably lived a similar life to you, maybe on the same piece of land, and so old people really knew what they were talking about. Today, the bucket's moving really quickly, and so the wisdom doesn't accumulate, but we think it does because our brain settings doesn't have the quickly moving bucket setting on it. So my grandmother gives me advice all the time, and I have to decide, is this, so there's certain things that are not changing, like relationships and love and, loyalty and things like this. Her advice on those things, I'll listen to it all day. She's one of the people who said, you got to live near your people you love, live near your family, right? I think that is like tremendous wisdom, right? That is wisdom, because that happens to be something that doesn't change from generation to generation.
For now.
Right. For now. She's also telling, right, so I'll be the idiot telling my grandkids that, and they'll actually be in some metaverse, like being like,
exactly,
it doesn't matter. And I'm like, it's not the same when you're not in person. They're going to say it's exactly the same, Grandpa. And they'll also be thinking to me with their Neuralink, and I'm going to be like, exactly. Slow down. I don't understand what you're saying. You just talk like a normal person. Anyway, so my grandmother but then she says, you're, I don't know about this writing you're doing. You should go to law school, and, you want to be secure. And that's not good advice for me, given the world I'm in and what I like to do and what I'm good at. That's not the right advice. But because the world is she's in a different world. So she became wise for a world that's no longer here, right? Now, if you think about that, so then when we think about conventional wisdom, it's a little like my grandmother. And there's a lot of, no, it's not maybe, 60 years outdated, like her software. It's maybe 10 years outdated to conventional wisdom, sometimes 20. So anyway, I think that we all continually don't have the confidence in our own reasoning when it conflicts with what everyone else thinks, with what seems right. We don't have the guts to act on that reasoning for that reason, right? And so there's so many Elon examples. I mean, just from the beginning, building Zip2 was his first company, and it was internet advertising at the time when people said, this internet was brand new, kind of thinking of like the metaverse, VR metaverse today. And people be like, oh, we facilitate internet advertising. People were saying, yeah, people are going to advertise on the internet. Yeah, right. But actually, it wasn't that he's magical and saw the future. It's that he looked at the present, looked at what the internet was, thought about, the obvious like advertising opportunity this was going to be. It wasn't rocket science. It wasn't genius, I don't believe. I think it was just seeing the truth. And when everyone else is laughing, saying, well, you're wrong. I mean, I did the math and here it is, right? Next company, X.com, which became eventually PayPal. People say, oh yeah, people are going to put their financial information on the internet. No way. To us, it seems so obvious. If you went back then, you would probably feel the same. You'd think that is a fake company. It's just obviously not a good idea. He looked around and said, I see where this is. And so again, he could see where it was going because he could see what it was that day and not what it, not people. Conventional wisdom was still a bunch of years earlier. SpaceX is the ultimate example. A friend of his apparently actually compiled a video montage of rockets blowing up to show him this is not a good idea. And but just even the bigger picture, the amount of billionaires who have thought this was, I'm going to start launching rockets, and the amount that failed. I mean, it's not. Conventional wisdom said this isn't a bad endeavor. He was putting all of his money into it.
Yeah.
Landing rockets was another thing. Well, if here's the classic kind of way we reason, which is if this could be done, NASA would have done it a long time ago because of the money it would save. If this could be done, the Soviet Union would have done it back in the 60s. It's obviously something that can't be done, and the math on his envelope said, well, I think it can be done. And so he just did it. So in each of these cases, I think actually in some ways Elon gets too much credit, as, people think it's that he's, it's that his Einstein intelligence, or he can see the future, or he has incredible guts. He's so, courageous. I think if you actually are looking at reality, and you're just assessing probabilities and you're ignoring all the noise, which is wrong, so wrong, right? And then you just have to be, pretty smart and, pretty courageous. And you have to have this magical ability to be sane and trust your reasoning over conventional wisdom, because your individual reasoning, part of it is that we see that we can't build a pencil. We can't build, the civilization on our own, right? We kind of tout to the collective because for good reasons, but this is different when it comes to kind of what's possible. The Beatles were doing their kind of Motown-y chord patterns in the early 60s, and they were doing what was normal. They were doing what was clearly this kind of sound is a hit. Mm-hmm. Then they started getting weird because they were so popular. They had this confidence to say, we're going to start just experimenting. And it turns out that if you all these people are in this one groove together doing music, and it's just there's a lot of land over there. And it seems I'm sure the managers would say, and that all the record execs would say, no, you have to be here. This is what sells. And it's just not true. So I think that Elon is the term for this that actually Elon likes to use is reasoning from first principles, the physics term. First principles are your axioms. And physicists, they don't say, well, what do people think? No, they say, what are the axioms? Those are the puzzle pieces. Let's use those to build a conclusion. That's our hypothesis. Now let's test it, right? And they come up with all kinds of new things constantly by doing that. If Einstein was assuming conventional wisdom was right, he never would have even tried to create something that really disproved Newton's laws. And the other way to reason is reasoning by analogy, which is a great shortcut. It's when we look at other people's reasoning and we kind of photocopy it into our head, we steal it. So reasoning by analogy, we do all the time, and it's usually a good thing. I mean, it takes a lot of mental energy and time to reason from first principles. It's actually, you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time, right? You want to often copy other people's reasoning most of the time. And most of us do it most of the time, and that's good. But there's certain moments when forget just for a second, succeeding in the world of Elon, just who you're going to marry, where you're going to settle down, how you're going to raise your kids, how you're going to educate your kids. how you should educate yourself, what kind of career paths in terms. These moments, this is what on your deathbed, like you look back on, and these are the few number of choices that really define your life. Those should not be reasoned by analogy. You should absolutely try to reason from first principles. And Elon, not just, by the way, in his work, but in his personal life. I mean, if you just look at the way he's on Twitter, it's not how you're supposed to be when you're a super famous, industry titan. You're not supposed to just be silly on Twitter and do memes and get in little quibbles with you. He just does things his own way, regardless of what you're supposed to do, which sometimes serves him and sometimes doesn't. But I think it has taken him where it has taken.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't describe his approach to Twitter as first principles, but I guess it has the same
I don't think it is. So first of all, I will say that a lot of tweets people think, oh, like he's going to be done after that. He's fine. He's on. He's just one man, Time Man of the Year. Like it's not sinking him, and I think it's not that I think this is like super reasoned out. I think that Twitter is his silly side, but I think that he with his reasoning did not feel like there was a giant risk in just being his silly self on Twitter. When a lot of billionaires would say, well, no one else is doing that.
Yes.
So it must be a good reason, right?
Well, I gotta say that he inspires me that it's okay to be silly.
Totally.
On Twitter. And, but yeah, you're right. The big inspiration is the willingness to do that when nobody else is doing it.
Yeah. And I think about all the great artists, all the great inventors and entrepreneurs, almost all of them, they had a moment when they trusted their reasoning. I mean, Airbnb was over 60 with VCs. A lot of people would say, obviously, they know something we don't. Mm-hmm. Right. But they didn't. They said, I think they're all wrong. I mean, that takes some kind of different wiring in your brain.
And then that's both for big picture and detailed, like engineering problems. It's fun to talk to him. It's fun to talk to Jim Keller, who's a good example of this kind of thinking about like manufacturing, how to get costs down. They always talk about they talk about SpaceX rockets this way. They talk about manufacturing this way, like cost per pound or per ton to get to orbit or something like that. This is how they reason. We need to get the cost down. It's a very kind of raw materials.
Yeah.
Like just very basic way of thinking.
First principles.
It's really,
And the first principles of a rocket are like the price of raw materials and gravity, and wind. I mean, these are your first principles and fuel. Henry Ford, what made Henry Ford blow up as an entrepreneur? The assembly line, right? I mean, he thought for a second and said, this isn't how manufacturing is normally done this way, but I think this is a different kind of product. And that's what changed it. Because, and then what happens is when someone reasons from first principles, they often fail. You're going out into the fog with no conventional wisdom to guide you. But when you succeed, what you notice is that everyone else turns and says, wait, what are they doing? And then they flock over. Look at the iPhone. Steve Jobs was famously good at reasoning from first principles because that guy had crazy self-confidence. He just said, if I think this is right, like everyone, and that, I mean, I don't know how he does that. And I don't think Apple can do that anymore. I mean, they lost that one brain's ability to do that made that in a totally different company, even though there's tens of thousands of people there. He didn't say, and now I'm giving a lot of credit to Steve Jobs, but of course it was a team at Apple who said they didn't look at the flip phones and say, okay, what kind of, let's make a keyboard that's like clicky and, really cool Apple-y keyboard. They said, what should a mobile device be? Mm-hmm. What the axioms, what are the axioms here? And none of them involved a keyboard necessarily. And by the time they pieced it up, there was no keyboard because it didn't make sense. Everyone suddenly is going, wait, what? What are they doing? And now every phone looks like the iPhone. I mean, that's how it goes.
You tweeted, what's something you've changed your mind about? That's the question you've tweeted. Elon replied, brain transplants. Sam Harris responded, nuclear power. There's a bunch of people with cool responses there. In general, what are your thoughts about some of the responses, and what have you changed your mind about, big or small, perhaps in doing the research for some of your writing?
So I'm writing right now, just finishing a book on kind of why our society is such a shit place at the moment, just polarized. And, we have all these gifts like we're talking about, just the supermarket, we have this exploding technology, fewer and fewer people are in poverty. It's Louis C.K. Likes to say, everything's amazing and no one's happy, right? And but it's really an extreme moment right now where it's like hate is on the rise, like crazy things, right? And
If I could interrupt briefly, you did tweet that you just wrote the last word.
I sure did.
And then there's some hilarious asshole who said, now you just have to work on all the ones in the middle.
Yeah, I earned that. I mean, when you earn a reputation as a tried and true procrastinator, you're just going to get shit
Yeah.
forever, and that's fine. I accept my fate there.
So do you mind sharing a little bit more about the details of what you're writing? So you're,
Yeah.
how do you approach this question about the state of society?
I wanted to figure out what was going on because what I noticed was a bad trend. It's not that, things are bad. It's that things are getting worse in certain ways, not in every way. And if you look at Max Roser's stuff, he comes up with all these amazing graphs. This is what's weird, is that things are getting better in almost every important metric you can think of. Except the amount of people who hate other people in their own country and the amount of people that hate their own country, that the amount of Americans that hate America is on the rise, right? The amount of Americans that hate other Americans is on the rise. The amount of Americans that hate the president is on the rise. All these things, like on the very steep rise. So what the hell? What's going on? Like there's something causing that. It's not that, a bunch of new people were born who were just dicks. It's that something is going on. So I think of it as a very simple, oversimplified equation, human behavior. And it's the output. And I think the two inputs are human nature and environment, right? And this is basic, super, super kindergarten level, like, animal behavior. But I think it's worth thinking about. You've got human nature, which is not changing very much, right? And then you throw that nature into a certain environment and it reacts to the environment, right? It's shaped by the environment. And then eventually what comes out is behavior, right? Human nature is not changing very much, but suddenly we're behaving differently, right? We are, again, look at the polls. Like it used to be that the president, was liked by, I don't remember the exact numbers, but 80% or 70% of their own party and 50% of the other party. And now it's like 40% of their own party and 10% of the other party. And it's not that the presidents are getting worse. And maybe some people would argue that they are, but more so. There's a lot of, idiot presidents throughout what's going on is something in the environment is changing. And that's different. That you're seeing as a change in behavior. An easy example here is that, by a lot of metrics, racism is becoming less and less of a problem. It's hard to measure, but there's metrics like, how upset would you be if your kid married someone of another race? And that number is plummeting. But racial grievance is